Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Club. I am your host, Jamill Payne. And with me today is my co-host, not Amanda again. It's my persnickety podcast co-host of the Jack Random Show that's not Jack Random. It's Kyle Fulton. How you doing today, Kyle?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing good. Doing good.
Hey, that's great to hear. Good morning, because it's very early. So, Kyle, for my audience that may not know, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a super geek of basically mythic proportions. If there is a geeky thing, I'm interested in it. I love fantasy, sci-fi, video games, comic books, superhero stuff more than anything. When it comes to, I've been reading comics, on and off, my entire life. I read them a lot when I was little, and I still remember exactly what my first issues of Batman and Spider-Man were that I had, and but I kind of fell out of that by the time I hit high school, and started reading just the weird shit. So I completely, I didn't really read superhero comics again until around when that second set of Deadpool comics got popular, because that's what, got my attention. Because I had enjoyed it before, and so the one after Cable and Deadpool, what's his face run, and it doesn't matter. Anyway, got me back into superhero stuff, and of course the movies got my attention, because movies are my primary everything. But so I've never not read comic books, but they tend to be the weird ones. I like stuff like The Unwritten and Lock and Key and Fables and Sandman and tons of Vertigo stuff and things that are a little bit more. And I know that those aren't those are like the popular weird ones, but there's other stuff too. It's just whatever the strangest things I can find to read. That's what I like best.
Right. So, Kyle, what always strikes me about you is your enthusiasm. Listeners, Kyle has been my podcast partner almost 5 years now. The amount of arguments that we've been in, because Kyle is so passionate, for better or for ill, that, it makes great radio. Now, I always like to bring up the fact that I remember when we started the Jack Random Show. It's not going to take long, right? As in, we didn't quite know each other, right? Like we knew Jack, we both knew Jack individually. And I remember coming on the show, and I remember thinking, me and this guy ain't going to have a lot in common. And the truth is that me and you like more the same stuff than we do compared to Jack. Like Jack hates everything, right? And you love everything. But I remember you was like, well, you probably wouldn't know this, Jamill, about Harry Potter yet. Then I was like, no, I read all the Harry Potter books. And you was like, what? And it threw you for a loop, cause you wasn't expecting me to say I read all the Harry Potter books. You never thought that would come out my mouth, cause you...
No, I assumed you'd be more like Jack. Because, and Jack hates all this stuff, and I had to, talk Jack into understanding why people like Harry Potter. And I just assumed, I guess assumed the same thing as you, that, I just figured you would be a lot more negative and not anywhere near as interested in such a wide range of shit. Because, well, I was wrong, and it's fantastic that I was wrong. I love the fact that, I'm
probably more Jack in demeanor, but I love shit like you. That's why what do Jack used to call me, the mid-range, because I'm right between the both of you extreme fuckers. That's my job, is to somehow
keep. And I want to be clear to your audience who might not be our audience or my audience, I don't love everything. I just look for stuff to enjoy in everything that I watch and experience because life fucking sucks. So why on earth would I choose? I can choose whether I want to look for the good in stuff or not. So why the hell would I choose not to look for the good in stuff? Everything blows. I'm gonna enjoy myself as much as I possibly can. So if I can find anything salvageable in something, I'm just like, okay, good enough. That'll do. I'm happy now. But
Okay, so Kyle, let's get started. Today, we are reading American Vampire, written by Scott Snyder and Stephen King, and drawn by I'm doing my spiel, Kyle, and drawn by Rafael Albuquerque. It won the 2010 or 2011 Eisner for Best New Series. It is published by Vertigo DC Comics. We're reading the first 11 issues. It began on March 10, 2010, and has been released sporadically ever since then. But right now, we are reading the first two trades, which are American Vampire. Is it just volume 1 and 2? Or do they not have, like, trade?
I'm not sure. I didn't see I have the actual issues collected from when it was coming out, so I don't know what they named the trade.
Because what I'm looking at is just American Vampire. Okay, so yeah, we just reading American Vampire volume 1 and 2. A new strain of vampire has emerged, much more vicious than the traditional variety. Scott Snyder and Stephen King set fire to the horror genre with a visionary, all-original take on one of the most popular monster stories as they trace the creature's bloodline through decades of American history. So, Mr. Fulton, why did you choose this book for us to talk about?
Because I worship Stephen King and everything he has ever touched and done, except for the things that suck, which do exist, but they're rare. And I wanted to do something with... I wanted very badly to do something Stephen King related for the comics. And I was thinking, Gunslinger comics, or maybe one of the translations that they did, like maybe some of The Stand, or maybe even N, which is a 4-issue miniseries that's really fucking cool and weird. But I was thinking, what's the coolest thing I've got that's Stephen King related that I can do? And it was American Vampire just kind of popped into my head. And then I discovered very coincidentally that your most recent episode was the Dark Metal, Batman Dark Knight's Metal.
Right.
Which was also Scott Snyder. And I figured that I now figure that after listening to a bit of that and hearing how much Jack hates Scott Snyder, I can come on and do the exact opposite thing because I fucking love the guy. But, yeah. Yeah, so that wasn't entirely the reason why I wanted to do it, but it certainly became the reason as time went on.
I mean, honestly, it's weird because this just turned into Scott Snyder month, and it was not planned at all. This was not intentional.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
Purely coincidental.
Yeah,
purely coincidental that I picked this one because I didn't know that Scott Snyder had done Metal. I just knew Metal existed. I'm not totally up on Batman, but all my favorite Batman stuff that has been written or published in the past
5 to 7 years,
all my favorite stuff, it's all Snyder. So it just wound up being a cool coincidence, and makes me want to check out Metal. I mean, I heard you guys most of the episode that you guys were talking about it, and it sounds interesting. I really want to check it out.
It's a mixed bag at most. It's
that's
definitely
what it sounded like.
Yeah.
But I love that concept. But you already did that show, so. When Stephen King meets vampires, good stuff always happens. He's just really good at vampires. So this is no exception. to me. I don't know how much he had to do with the actual creation of it. It's been a little hard for me to find out. What ended up happening for sure, though, is that for the first 5 issues, there's basically 2 stories in each, and one of them takes place in the late 1800s and is about the first American vampire, Skinner Sweet, who was an outlaw and, ran his gang and everything like that. And that bit is written by King. And then there's the newer, well, relatively newer. It takes place in 1925. So the newer stretch, which is written by Snyder. So I don't actually know who came up with more of this concept, or if it was they worked together, or if Snyder had the idea and approached King, or the other way around. I'm really not sure. I probably should have done a little bit more research on that.
Well, in the trade, the forward, King actually writes the forward, and he says he basically said he took Snyder's detailed notes and wrote the story from there. And he just said he added his flair here and there, but a lot of this is from Snyder's detailed notes.
Okay, so primarily Snyder and just King wanted to get in on that. All right, that's great.
I think Snyder approached him because I think Snyder, like you and like most people, are a big Stephen King fan, and he knows Stephen King writes vampires very well, so it makes sense that Snyder would approach him for this.
Yeah, it does. That's awesome.
Let's start here. Like, this is the question I want to ask you. This book comes out in 2010. Now, I don't know how long he's been working on this, but I just want to, like, do you feel like American Vampire is Scott Snyder's answer to Twilight?
Kinda. I can see exactly what you're saying, and kinda. I mean, the timing is pretty good. When did the movies start hitting?
The first movie came out in 2008.
Okay, yeah, then yeah, probably, yeah. There was a big pushback against Twilight in vampire fiction, period, where everybody was just like, okay, let's remind everybody how awful vampires are, as opposed to how weirdly sexy vampires are. And let's do away with our sparkles and bring back the blood, which I can get behind. I don't begrudge anybody enjoying their weird, sexy vampire novels. I just prefer them to have some tinge of horror. So when I want to read a bunch of homoerotic vampire shit, I go for Anne Rice, because, they're really sexy, but they do still eat babies sometimes. So
exactly,
it's got those elements of horror. They're there. It's in it.
Because this is why I say this. This is why I ask this question, because there's actually one thing that I'm not saying it's taken from Twilight, but the idea of day walking vampires, right? Which we know in Twilight is absolutely ridiculous. They sparkle, they don't burn, and people were just like, vampires don't come out during the day, they burn. It almost feel like Snyder was saying, you know what? Day walking vampires can work if you do it right. Let me show you how.
Yes, I can see that.
And that's what I feel. I have nothing to back this up, but just from reading it, it does feel like it's a answer to that. So, I think we should start with the fact that the two main protagonists of these stories, right? One is Pearl Jones, an actress in the 20s, and the other one, as you said, is Skinner Sweet, an outlaw vampire from the Wild West. Now, I don't know about you, despite how bad Leonard Skinner Sweet is, I'm about to say Leonard Skinner, Skinner Sweet is. Despite how bad he is, right? Despite, they go out their way to show how bad he is.
Oh, I think he is so bad.
I think I still kind of root for him. And I don't know what that says about me. Because he's not even an anti-hero. He's a straight up villain.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. There is no point that he has appeared that I have read anyway where he has been anything other than an unrepentant monster. And I think that part of that is the flashback sequences, the Bad Blood storyline. Part of it is the fact that was written by Stephen King, and that's where we see most of Skinner Sweet. And King is very, 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 very good at making you love a villain, even though they are a fucking monster. He's extremely good at that. So I think that goes a long way toward making it so. He's like Stephen King villain, which means blatantly and openly racist, like most King villains are. But to be fair, also like most humans were. And, well, still are, I guess. But I was going to say most were in the late 1800s, so you know. But, like, and he's just straight up a psychotic murderer who just ends up being a vampire. And that's bad for pretty much everyone who's ever.
Well, I think what Snyder does smartly is, as bad as he is, like, he's a rapist, he's a murderer, he's vindictive, he's hateful. The European vampires are 10 times worse. So, like, it's easy to, root for him. Like, in comparison, right? He's clearly better than them. I mean, he's still terrible by our standards, but but there's a evilness to, like, there's an evil and maliciousness to, like,
the traditional vampires,
the European vampires that Skinner doesn't necessarily have. And maybe it's just an American thing, right? It's just like, fuck them Europeans, right? Like, I know that's a weird thing to say, right? Like, but like, hear me out, right? Like, since we are Americans, we are steeped in this culture. We can't help but be. If you're born here, you know what I'm saying? It runs through your blood and veins. And to see a bunch of hoity-toity, effeminate, vampires, you just kind of like, hee-haw, yeah, kill them. Because, you know, Americans are just cowboys at heart. And I wonder if that has something to do with on how we can root for Skinner Sweet.
It absolutely does. I think you're completely correct, because at the end of the day, America is a country that was largely founded by a bunch of psychopaths. We really, really, really fucked this place up when we got here, you know? And that's just kind of baked into the crust. We're a fucked up culture, and we will always be a fucked up culture. I don't know if it can be fixed. And just the way we are, we don't really want it to be, which is bad and terrible, but also, like, we just can't help but root for a good villain. And I know that's not exclusive to America, but that is how it is, and we also cannot help but root for, like you said, just fuck the Europeans. Just screw them. As a person, I don't feel that way, but there is something in my bones that I find very, very entertaining about watching an American straight up evil cowboy, like an American, well, I guess outlaw is the best word. Like, just an American outlaw, just fucking them up. It's just great.
And in a weird way, this is like this weird subtext of patriotism. And I'm not for sure if Snyder meant this, right? But the American vampires are faster, stronger, more deadly than the European vampires, right? And it just plays into that. It plays into that America, like, exceptionalism that we all walk around with in this country. Like, basically, we walk around like, shit don't stink. Because we believe we're better than everybody. And since the American vampires are the most powerful vampires on the planet as of right now, it plays into that, right? And like, it's weird too, because if you read, there's 3 versions of vampires within this story, and they're all like taken from like a version of vampires, right? You have the original vampires, which, well, I don't know if they're the original, but you have like the older living vampires, which are like bat creatures.
Yes.
Then you have the European, then you have the stronger European vampires, which are more like the traditional Dracula vampires.
Yeah.
And then you have the American vampire, or the Twilight vampire, or whatever it would be, right? And like, so like, it's this very funny thing of like evolution within the bloodline. And like, but it's not like a slow evolution. Like they are very, like the European vampires are very aware that eventually, it seems like they're very aware that eventually there will be a stronger vampire. So they try their best to, to keep the blood pure, so to speak, and to make sure nobody gets infected that shouldn't be because of that. Because again,
it seems to just. It seems to, according to the stories and stuff, it seems to somehow be tied to location, like to where you were born, to that, which is why it's called American vampire, like specifically, and like they call the really old bat ones Carpathian vampires, so they're like from, they're the Dracula vampires, and then the other ones were all European, like French and German and stuff. And they all seem to be the same type. And like they all have the idea here is that they all have very different sets of weaknesses and strengths, and that I'm just kind of reiterating for anyway. So, and they seem to be like the Europeans seem to be tied to the extremely traditional ones. Like they mention that they can't go through running water. At one point in there. They never show it, but they do mention that they can't rise out of running water, which is, that's like old school vampire shit. That's stuff you don't even see anymore, like at all, in modern vampire fiction, because when you think about it, it's really silly and inconvenient, like, because there's running water straight up everywhere. Like, does that mean that they can't cross it? They can't touch it, or can they like not cross it like a line? And if so, can you just trap them in an apartment because of like, just trap them in a bathroom because there's pipes in the walls? Like, I don't know. But so they kind of and they get killed by wood, all that stuff. Can be as long as their heart is pierced with wood, and they get a little creative with that in this too. I remember there's one vampire that gets taken out by being shoved onto a cactus. One of those big ones, mind you, with the really long, crazy thorns, but still just thorns through the heart, and it did it. One of them gets killed with a champagne cork into the heart, which is the most ridiculous thing in these comics that I've seen. But then, so the American vampires are, as Jamill mentioned earlier, they're daywalkers. They are not hurt by sunlight at all. That when they go to feed, they transform in pretty cool, freaky ways. Like, they're the ones where the fangs are huge, their jaws unhinge, their hands turn into, like, claws beyond all reason. Like they are freaky as shit, these American vampires. And, other than that, they only go. Their only other weaknesses seem to be that they are mortal and exhausted when there's no moon. So on the new moon, they have no choice but to like hide and protect themselves, because it seems like pretty much anything can kill them then. Anything that can kill a mortal can kill them, and that they are hurt by gold.
Not weird, but it's this thing of like the Carpathian vampire looks at the European vampires the same way the European vampires look at the American vampire, as some type of abomination. Like it's like it's kind of like it's like the cyclical thing. Like so, like I'm just imagining like 500 to 600 years from now, with the American vampire, there'll be a new vampire that rises up that's more powerful than them that they would then look upon and discuss. That seems to be the cycle of it, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's implied there are a lot more types of vampires than we've seen, which is great. That excites me because there are so many different versions of vampires in fiction. It's really cool that they came up with a way for us to have all of them in one story. So they can make up something new, like completely new, like they did with the American vampires, or they can reach back into classic vampire lore. Like we still haven't seen like a Nosferatu style one.
You don't feel like the Carpathian is closer to Nosferatu style of vampire?
I think the Carpathian's closer to classic Dracula because he can and does turn into like a Batman hybrid, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I have to double check on that, but I'm 90% sure. It's been a while since I've read Dracula, but I do think he did that. And then the Europeans are basically Anne Rice vampires, except with the classic rules. So they're the stuck up. They are stuck up. They are very classy. In that sense, they're very Anne Rice-y, but they do have like the more traditional rules. Where Anne Rice, like if you get, if a vampire gets old enough or drinks enough powerful blood, they can actually become immune to the sun and things like that. But so they don't follow those rules precisely. But in terms of like characterization, they're a lot more like the villain ones from those books.
Okay, so let's get sweet. So let's talk about Pearl Jones. Pearl Jones is an actress in Hollywood. Her and her friend Hattie, right? Is that her name, Hattie? Yes.
Hattie Hartgrove.
Hattie Hartgrove. That's a very 1920s name if I ever heard one. Pearl Jones by comparison is actually pretty plain. So we're not going to go plot by plot, but basically Pearl and Hattie are extras on the set, and I guess the most famous actor of the time, he looks like a Clark Gable type.
Yes.
Invites Pearl to a party, where she subsequently gets attacked by the European vampires and left for dead. That's when Stuart Sweet comes in and basically turns her, making her the second American vampire.
Yeah.
And we just to say, did I say Stuart Sweet? What is it? Skinner Sweet.
It's Skinner Sweet, yeah.
Yeah, one day I'm going to get...
I didn't want to interrupt, but
no.
I was going to point it out in a second.
But no, we also should say Skinner Sweet dies and comes back because he's being arrested and taken across country in a train, but his gang breaks him out. But the person that owns the train is one of those European vampires, and the European vampire ends up accidentally splashing blood into one of Skinner Sweet's wounds. And that's what you need to turn. It's not the bite that turns you. It is blood transfusion. It's straight up blood transfusion that turns you. So that's important going forward. And like basically Skinner makes a couple of enemies in the Pinkertons. Which is actually, it's weird to have Pinkertons as the good guys after playing Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But it's so weird because like we're just so used to seeing the outlaws in westerns as protagonists these days, especially, that my instant thought when I hear Pinkerton is to be like those fucking pink. But they were great. They did very good things and did a lot of terrible suffering. And apparently they still exist and get really pissed off when they're portrayed as villains.
I mean, I'm just saying they didn't have a problem with they didn't have a problem until Red Dead Redemption 2 made like $1 billion. I'm just saying. All of a sudden there's a problem because it wasn't a problem in the first game.
Yeah, very true. Anyway, there's, like I said, there are like multiple layers of story here, and they're pretty well stitched together. So you can see where Skinner Sweet came from, and then he turns Pearl, and he comes along and turns Pearl pretty much on a whim, which is, a huge deal because at that point then there are only 2 living American vampires, and it's those 2.
Well, it seems like Skinner has a long game as far as this war on the old vampires. It seems he had, and for whatever reason, even though it's not explicitly said, it seems like he sees something in her, isn't why he turned her, and he actually proves to be right. You know what I'm saying? He absolutely proves to be right that, like, if he was going to turn anybody, she was the perfect candidate because she is vicious. She's almost more vicious than he is, and he's the bad guy.
Yeah. She has this wonderful. I actually really like her personality and the way that it's gone with, because like she has this incredible vicious streak when it comes to protecting herself and taking revenge. Like, she is one vengeance-minded chick. She goes absolutely nuts to take out all of the vampires who fucked her over, and the humans too. You know, anyone who like did this stuff. But when it's not involved with that, she's actually incredibly good as a rule at keeping her vampire self in check. Which is cool. I like that very much. And it's a little bit of a cliche at this point to have the vampire who keeps it under control, but I feel like there's something special about Pearl and the way she's written in just how fucking vicious she is when she does let loose, because she is she take the vampirism like a fish to water, basically. Yeah. Like there's no struggling with powers. There's no, oh, I'm a monster. There's none of that. It's just straight from, I'm a vampire, cool. It's time to murder. Like it's just that quick. Yep. It goes very, very well, and very well for her. Anyway, and it's very, very interesting. I'm very eager to get further in this story because I really want to see where she goes.
Right.
I've read up to a point, but like Jamill said, I read up to what I actually collected, which is like maybe another 5 issues past this point, and then one of the miniseries, and then there was, sometimes you just have to stop collecting comics for a while, and I did.
It gets expensive.
Yeah, exactly. And it got away from me. And I thought it had been canceled actually like years and years ago. And I was just totally wrong on that. It has been updated and continued occasionally throughout the entire years, going so far as there's supposed to be another series of it starting in 2020. And it is almost entirely done by Scott Snyder, with a couple of very rare exceptions.
Snyder and Albuquerque, it seems like the main series is basically them.
Yeah, almost always. There are a couple of exceptions floating around, but not many at all. Which I think is fantastic. I absolutely love the art in this.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions. Is how is the art?
Oh, I freaking adore it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think that everybody has really everybody has very unique, recognizable looks, and it's beyond that, he just draws this shit in ways that are just goddamn terrifying. Like, I love the hyper exaggerated look of the American vampires is just it's just wonderful. It's exactly the kind of artist he is exactly the kind of artist that I like best. It's difficult for me to put into words what I like about it. It's not cartoony, but it's not realistic either. It skirts this line between the two. I love how vibrant everything is. I love how unafraid, and it's super like unafraid to be bloody and splattery and all that, but it's not gratuitously so, like, ever. They never show you more of that shit than they need to, but they also never ever shy away from it at all. And that's where I like things to be. I mean, I love a good gore fest as much as the next guy, but unless that's like explicitly what I'm here for, I prefer it to be balanced. And I love everything about this.
My thing is, why hasn't this been optioned as a TV show or a movie yet?
I have been wondering that myself. I don't have the slightest clue. It's like ripe for it.
Is he just waiting for it to be finished? Like maybe he doesn't want a George R.R. Martin situation.
Yeah, maybe. I have no idea. Like, I assume he intends to get up to modern times with the story, because he has gone. Because it has continued to move forward in time. Like, the next storyline, I guess, from an interview that he gave recently, is supposed to take place in the 1970s. So, like, it has been moving forward in time, following these American vampires.
So so after Pearl turns, we are introduced to the fact that there are vampire hunters, which I was wondering was this going to be a part of this story. They don't show up until maybe like the 6th issue, I believe. So I was wondering, like, are they vampire? Like, I feel like there would be vampire hunters in this story, and true enough, they are.
The Vassals of the Morning Star.
Yes, the Vassals of the Morning Star. Now, I can't remember any names, even though I just read this. By the way, I just want to say this book is infinitely readable. Like I couldn't put it down, but I can't remember any names to save my life. The girl, book. What's the girl? Felicia Book. Yes, Felicia Book. Is the daughter of James Book, I believe. Is it James Book?
Yeah, James Book was Skinner Sweet's nemesis in the 1800s and early 1900s. He's the Pinkerton agent who was responsible for all of that, and they had a lot of back and forth. Like, Skinner killed his wife, and he was responsible for catching Skinner, and like, it was just this horrible back and forth thing that turned really ugly once Skinner became a vampire.
And he basically dooms him to like a torture worse than death, as in he turned him.
Yes. And then, much like Pearl, he actually manages to keep it under control until he does what he believes is, take care of the situation. But he ends up having, what would you call her? I guess this is a complicated thing.
Well, his goddaughter. But it's not as sleazy as it sounds.
Yeah, he's kind of with his goddaughter, and she kills him at his request, but not until he manages to impregnate her. And then their daughter is Felicia Book, who winds up a vampire hunter. So in case you were wondering if this shit can get past, and if a vampire can father a kid, and whether or not that kid will be human, the answer seems to be yes, and yes, just human.
No, there's something special about her. I just read it last night when they was when they was fighting in the cave. One of the vampires bit her, and he was like, "What the hell are you?"
Oh, that's right. I actually forgot about that moment because it didn't amount to anything in the stories that we read, so I actually forgot about that moment. That's a point I straight up forgot.
But I caught that. But like, from all appearances, she seems human for the most part. Yeah. But clearly, there's something
different. Yeah, right. You are. I cannot believe I forgot that. I just read them yesterday. I sat down and read through the whole damn thing yesterday, and I just blanked, I guess.
But yeah, so this story like it spans what these two trades spans basically a decade, and we end up in Las Vegas where Skinner is a pimp.
Yep.
he basically helped make Las Vegas what it is, which totally makes sense. We're introduced to a new white male protagonist.
Yeah, Cash.
Yeah, Cash.
Vegas cop.
Right, before Vegas became fully Vegas. Right, basically he's a lawman in a lawless town, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a cool enough character, and I like his backstory and everything. Like they shift around characters quite a bit, which is cool.
And like they keep like they also keep like the two. Well, they integrate a little bit more, but they keep the two-story go between. Basically, it basically goes between Cash and his escorts in Las Vegas, and Pearl and her boyfriend living their lives and their exploits, and it goes between those two.
Yeah, but they don't separate them as separate stories anymore. They just keep the
So go ahead.
I was going to say, which is a good way to do it, because I like that, because we have to keep track of both of these characters throughout the years, but we don't have to, that doesn't mean they need to be constantly interacting and bumping into each other. I assume it's building to something.
Right.
But, yeah.
So, let's talk about familiars. Like in classic vampire fashion, the European vampires seem to have familiars, but it is not about, because the thing with familiars is the promise that eventually they'll get turned into vampires.
Yeah,
which the European, Renfielding. Yeah. But the reward for being a familiar for a vampire, it doesn't seem to be vampirism, because again the vampires don't want that. It seems to be influence and power.
Yeah. Because vampires, being as old as they are, have, of course, amassed great fortunes, and why would they not use that to, manipulate things and everything? So, like, for example, the guy who tried to feed Pearl to those vampires to begin with was, as Jamill mentioned, a very famous actor. And it seemed like he was doing that, to keep getting jobs, essentially.
And two vampires that Pearl killed, their driver was a movie star. Like the vampire's driver was an actual movie star that she also murdered. So and we also should say that Hattie, her best friend, betrays her.
So Hattie is extremely jealous, right? And that's correct. There is a fight. There's a fight in her apartment. There's a fight in her and somehow Pearl's blood winds up on broken glass, which she then uses to she stabs herself with it so that she can turn also into a vampire. And you wind up with one hell of a cool vamp fight between the two of them. We're all over the map here. This is like.
Oh, don't worry. That's what we do. Like for this show, Kyle, we just kind of do a general discussion. We don't try to go in order. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, so it's fine.
Okay, cool.
Because because we always just assumed everybody read the comic book. You know what I'm saying? That's why it's a book.
That's why you let them know.
Yes.
A week in advance. So the idea here being, okay, got it. Then that makes it good. That makes it fun then. So Hattie having turned herself, we wind up with a really cool confrontation in the soundstage. Kick-ass fight. And that's where, God, that was cool. I like vampire versus vampire shit. It's always cool. But like the sheer level of violence and betrayal that Hattie is capable of showing is insane. Like it's pretty clear she was bat crap from day one.
Well, I was just going to say like it's really messed up because she's mad at Pearl, but Pearl didn't do anything wrong to her. Like literally, it's literally what Hattie did and not Pearl, but somehow Hattie doesn't see it that way.
Yeah. She comes back in toward so it turns out that, she didn't God, I love this. I love this so much. I love the reveal that she's still alive, because I was never convinced she was dead.
Right, because we don't know how vampires die, except for, like, if you, like, you have to completely almost dismember them, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or complete, I think Hattie says you have to, like, completely destroy, the brain or the heart. But even then, they're just really hard to put down for good. So, like, even the vampires that we've seen straight up dusted in this comic, I'm not convinced there's a dead vampire anywhere in this series. I'm not convinced, because they do have a very strong tendency to get back up eventually.
Especially the American variety.
Oh, yeah. They are some sturdy things.
So, like, it seems, also you can have permanent scars because, Hattie's face is fucked up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so they do definitely, like, healing has to happen, and they are capable of being scarred. They're capable of being, it's very different. Like, and that's what I'm talking about. I love that. I love that it's got, like, the same rules, but just a little bit different.
There's almost a science, like it's almost scientific in a way, which is also not new. You know what I'm saying? Science and, like, vampirism always seems to get mixed up, especially within the last 30 or 40 years of vampire fiction. So, yeah.
Yes.
So, Pearl and her, what's her boyfriend name, Kyle?
That would be Henry.
Henry.
Henry Preston.
They've basically been living a life of relatively peace until the vampires hunters come a-knocking.
Yep.
And they want no parts of her. They threaten her, but you can clearly tell that they want no parts.
Yeah. They do not want to fuck with Pearl. She is high on their list of incredibly dangerous vampires, and they straight up do not know how to hurt her. And you can tell. And they go to her basically out of desperation, just being like, if you know what hurts you, please tell us, because we need to wipe out Skinner Sweet. And she's just like, haha, fuck off.
Well, no, I like what she says. She's like, he's a bad person. She said, oh yeah, I know he's bad, but I ain't selling him out to y'all. And, like, I feel that, like, believing as bad as he is, I completely understand that reasoning. You know what I'm saying? Cause, like, honestly, if you know how to kill him, no matter what you say, you're gonna come for me eventually. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And they're even trying to. That was some bold shit that they did. They're even trying to do that. Well, then again, maybe not, because if she had tried to, I mean, Felicia was with them, so if they had tried to, if Pearl had tried to, God knows what would have happened if she tried to, like, kill Felicia or bit her or whatever. I don't know.
It's funny because Henry, like Pearl doesn't know why Henry is still with her, considering that she's quote unquote a monster, right? But, like, there's this cool action scene where basically one of Henry's old friends was going to sell him out to the vampires for blood. Henry's friend was a familiar as well. That's what I'm calling them. They don't call them that in the book, but that's just what I'm calling them because that's basically how they operate, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, why she questions that and why she see him as a monster, Henry, to his credit, is with it. Like the whole, like you know, he's
completely on board.
Like he's a man of action, and he's just as crazy and as vicious as she is. Only he's human. While she's killing everybody in the back room, he decides he's going to get in a car and have a high speed gun chase. He's just like, oh, they made for each other. Like they absolutely, because like that's nuts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. They like It's really great. There's a moment where, like, she's having these thoughts of, man, he sees me be this horrible monster, and one of these days he's gonna just run after he sees it, and maybe it won't, maybe it hasn't sunk in yet, and maybe this will happen. And she walks out, and he's missing. He's, like, gone. And I loved this so much. And where he's, like, gone, and she's like, Henry, and then it cuts to him, and he's like, run, gotta run as far as I can, and then he's like, because I gotta catch this guy, and it's like fucking, it just cuts to them having a car chase. He's just like, oh, that motherfucker got away. No, not on my watch. I'm killing his ass. It's a great little.
And like she was like, stand behind me, Henry, and he immediately breaks a chair and make two states. Like it's great, man. It's great. Like
it's fucking fantastic. It's a good goddamn comic book. I absolutely love this.
It is infinitely readable. Like I said, I just couldn't pin it down. And also, I like the fact that the arcs are 5 issue as opposed to the standard 6, which is, if you've been reading trade paperbacks long enough, the standard size for a trade paperback is 6. I like that these are only 5.
Yeah. The second one is, well, no, kind of. The second one has 6 issues in it. But it's a 4-issue story arc and then a 2-issue story arc.
No, it's 6 through 11, isn't it?
Yeah, 6 through 11 is 6.
No, it's not. That's 5, right?
No, 1 through 5 is 5. 6 through 11 is 6. It would be 6. Wait. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
No, yeah. You're right. I'm sorry. I can't count. I'm gonna leave that in. I'm going to leave that in.
Okay, but it isn't a 5-issue story. It's a 4-issue story and then a 2-issue story. So they are still shorter. They're shorter arcs. They're quicker. Yeah, they're
nice and digestible. You know what I'm saying? And it's not allowed. Look, after reading so many issues of Sandman, I appreciate comics that don't have a lot of words all of a sudden. It's funny how that works. When you read the most wordy shit ever in comic books, to all of a sudden like, oh good, I don't have to read all this. I can just look at pictures and get the stuff.
Don't give it. I fucking adore the Sandman, but yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about. It's a very different experience, and it's a much more casual, entertaining.
Well, like,
experience.
I feel like it's a muscle, right? Like, if you lift heavy weights for so long, anything that's not as heavy becomes light. I feel like this is what this. All of a sudden, I can read fast as hell. All of a sudden, because I had to sit there and read 10 volumes of Sandman. Mind you, I love Sandman. I'm not complaining about Sandman. I'm just saying that's a lot of words. So, Kyle, I think we are coming to the end of this episode. Would you? Well, I know you, but I have to ask. Would you recommend this book? And who would you recommend it to?
Anyone who enjoys vampire fiction, Stephen King, or really anything else that's just a bloody good time. It's fucking fantastic.
And just for my part, I wholeheartedly recommend this book. The last couple of books we've done on the show have been kind of mixed bag or lackluster. We did the Infinity Gauntlet, which I know. I got a couple of emails about that, by the way, about how much we didn't like the Infinity Gauntlet and Dark Knight Metal. So it feels good to like read something that I've really enjoyed. Now, this is where I have to do some house cleaning. Please, audience, don't turn off the podcast. The month of June is coming, and I've decided, and Amanda agreed gracefully because I gave her the choice. The 35th anniversary of Ghostbusters is this June. Ghostbusters, I love Ghostbusters. It's the first thing I've ever loved that's pop culture related. I think the second might be E.T. But Ghostbusters is the first thing I ever loved pop culture related. It stuck with me all these years. So for the month of June, we're going weekly and we're doing Ghostbusters month, baby. Week 1, we are starting off with a retrospective of all 3 movies. We're also going to include the anime series in that. Week 2, that's when we're going to reading, and we'll be reading Ghostbusters Mass Hysteria. There's volume 8 and 9 of the ongoing series for week 3, we are reading Ghostbusters Get Real and Ghostbusters 101. Get Real is where they meet the animated counterparts, and Ghostbusters 101 is where they meet the 2016 female version of the Ghostbusters. Then we'll wrap it up with Ghostbusters Crossing Over, which is the 8-issue mega event. We'll be reading that in week 4. That's where all the Ghostbusters from every dimension get together to beat some type of evil, and I really hope you guys will join us for all 4 weeks of our content that we have putting out. Kyle, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Will you be listening?
Absolutely. For Ghostbusters, fuck yeah.
I need the downloads, buddy.
Okay, I don't like downloading podcasts. I stream them.
Well, whatever.
But all right.
It all look, that's fine. That counts too. I think that all counts.
Cool.
So, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me for this episode, for being my guest co-pilot.
No, thank you for having me. It's good thing.
All right. So, for Kyle Fulton, I am Jamill Payne, and we are out.